I definitely want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you.
It's great having you, and to all my listeners, I'm talking to Richard Sheridan today. Richard's been the CEO and Chief Storyteller at Menlo Innovations since co-founding the company in 2001, correct?
Yes.
And since then, you've authored 2 books, and we were just talking about Joy Inc., which we had the pleasure of interviewing you a couple of years ago, which you had Tom Peters write the forward, and then book Chief Joy Officer #2 with Tom Peters as well. And I guess, how would you synthesize what is leadership philosophy? But how would you synthesize when people say what is the kind of macro theme from this book?
I use a metaphor now to synthesize the lessons of the book. This metaphor is not in the book. It kind of came forth after I gave a lot of talks about it. And it's a metaphor for an airplane, using an airplane as a metaphor for leadership. And if we think of the forces at work on an aircraft, lift, weight, thrust, and drag,
Sure.
Same forces are at work on human organizations. The lift of human energy, the weight of bureaucracy, the thrust of purpose, and the drag of fear. And if we're really going to get our organizational aircraft off the ground every day, we have to have more lift than weight. We have to have more thrust than drag. And so the question is, how do we, as leaders, lift the human energy of our team, keep their focus on the thrust of our purpose, reduce the weight of bureaucracy and meeting load, and as much as possible, eliminate the drag of fear on our organizations?
It's amazing to think about, just those themes there. And one of it's interesting, it popped in my head, Chief Joy Officer. And I was having a conversation with my 15-year-old this week, and she's a freshman in high school. And as you might imagine, girls as a freshman in high school, there's just a certain dynamic that she's navigating. It's external stimulus, internal stimulus. Did we do the right, parenting so that she can kind of have enough lift and inertia to go through situations with enough core self-esteem? And the basic thing we were talking about is, can your own happiness affect a situation, or does the situation affect your own happiness?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, is it a 51-49? Are you 51%? Your happiness has a deep impact on your team, on your friends around you, regardless of how negative that situation is, or the reverse. The negative situation is the predominant factor of your happiness. And so I'm curious, what do you think about that as it relates to organizational dynamics?
There's no question that people look to leaders for inputs. I was just talking with one of my daughters, who's a little bit older than yours. She's out in the work world, and she was talking about her boss. This was literally just last night. And she said, boy, and especially in Zoom world, right? She said, I really have trouble reading him. And every time we interact, I just feel kind of a little bit of demoralization. And so it becomes this force she has to fight against to bring her whole self to work, to really dive in. And so, this is an important part of leadership. We have to be that beaconing force inside of our organizations. They're going to, the teams look to their leaders. You imagine how many times teams have watched their leader come out of a room, and are they smiling and laughing, or they've got a frown on their face and heavy shoulders, and they're wondering what happened in there. Are we doomed? And that sort of thing. And it's not all about rainbows and unicorns type of thing. They want us to be realistic as well. But I think it's best summed up in the relationship I have with my wife, particularly as it relates to work, but not just work. She actually works at Menlo too. And when times are really tough, sometimes she just looks to me and she says, you know what, honey, all I need to hear from you is it's going to be okay. And that little bit of lift can just keep her going.
Yeah.
I think this is really important. And I think for your daughter, I would say that, number one, be careful with who you hang out with, because they can drag you down. And but number two, you can be that positive force just among your friends, just among your peers. You can say, we can do this. We can get
Yeah.
through this, whatever it is, whether it's a homework assignment or some social situation. You know, she can start to lead. And I think that's the important part, is we can lead from anywhere.
Yeah, I love that. And a big part of my community of CIOs and business leaders is, so you have the strategy, innovation, and leadership, but then also I believe in this 10X mindset. And the 10X mindset is just, are we 3 to 5% kind of incremental thinkers of our capabilities with the 6 inches between our ears? Or can we in the midst of a heavy situation, can we actually bring a different approach to the situation? And because we're so pre-wired from previous leaders and mentors that we have, our father, our parent, our mother, and like, can we actually make that decision to have like a 10X approach and go, is there a radical different way I can approach this so I can come at it with a sense of lift that you talked about?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, I remember the first time I made a significant change in my professional life was when I was a VP at Interface Systems, the company that I was at just before starting Menlo. And I was in a personal trough of disillusionment there. I had climbed the career ladder. It was, from the world's measure of success, it was everything I had hoped and dreamed for. But here, I was heavy in my heart. I thought there's got to be a better way. And I made some radical changes, and they worked. And one of my team members came to me afterwards. Somebody had worked for me for a long time. And he looked at me and he said, "How did you do it?" I said, "What?" And he said, "This radical change." He said, "When you started this 6 months ago, you couldn't have had any idea it was going to work out this well when you began."
Right.
Why were you willing to take the risk? And I looked at him, I said, "It was actually quite easy." And he was dumbfounded, right? And I said, "David, you're looking at, the worldly stuff." Because he had said to me, he says, "You had everything. You had the title, the job, the authority, the paycheck, the stock options. Why were you willing to put all of that at risk?" And I said, "David, you're looking at the wrong thing. What was at risk was here." I said, "I'm in my early 40s. I'm looking ahead." And I said, "I can't do this for another 20 years the way we're doing it." And I said, so I wasn't racing towards risk. I was racing towards safety, my safety.
Yeah.
And I said, once I crossed that bridge in my mind, running towards change was actually easy.
Was there like a defining moment though, that like, was there a sort of I put a stake in the ground moment and saying just no more of doing it the old way?
I would guess there were several along the way. Early on in my career, sort of in my 30s, I was contemplating getting out entirely. I come home, my wife would look at me and she'd say, "Honey, you look really tired. Did you get a lot done today?" I'm like, "No, I got nothing done today." And it was a long day and I worked hard and I was answering phone calls and running around like with my hair on fire. And I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way or I'm getting out. And so I started reading books like Tom Peters' book In Search of Excellence and Peter Drucker's books on management. And, and the books I was drawn to were not about technology, which was my training, my background, my skills. It was about people. How do we organize the humans more effectively?
Right.
And so right there, I had a little spring of hope, a little ray of sunshine creeping through the clouds, because I thought, okay, Tom Peters described all these great companies. He didn't tell you necessarily how to get there, but at least gave me hope that such a thing exists. And then, I keep climbing the career ladder and I got a promotion to VP, one that I actually resisted at first because I told my boss at the time, I said, "I don't want to sign up for the uncapped personal commitment of being a VP at a troubled public company. I'll miss my family at the very least." And yet I still changed my mind. And that was a pretty pivotal moment too, because I thought, this is your time. This is your chance. But I'll tell you, the crystal clear moment for me occurred when I took my 8-year-old daughter to work with me one day for a Take Your Child to Work Day. I don't know if they have that in your school system, but she was 8. I was just a newly minted VP. You take your kid to work, they watch you work all day, right? And somehow in hopes of inspiring their own career thoughts. Well, what on earth is an 8-year-old going to see when they watch a VP work, right? Oh, my dad does email all day long.
Right.
How exciting. I can't wait to get out into the work world. But at the end of the day, I asked her, I said, so Sarah, what did you see? And of course, I'm sure you've had these moments with your daughter as well. They say things that just rock your world. She probably didn't even think of it that way. She said, what I saw, Dad, is you're really important here.
Mm.
I said, what? She goes, yeah, I saw people lined up at your door all day long, and they couldn't make a decision without asking you first. Now, she felt very proud. I was instantly mortified because I realized I had built a hero-based organization.
Interesting. Yeah.
I was the #1 hero, right? And think how we get to our positions of authority and title. We probably drowned out the voices of others in meetings. We probably make sure it's our idea that wins. We're tracking towards individual performance goals. And so, I looked across at this 8-year-old and I said, I don't want to wake up 10 years later realizing I missed the best parts of being a dad. And so in that moment, I knew I had to change, that the change had to begin with me. This wasn't about them. This wasn't about they. This isn't about if I can only get all of them to change, I'm fine. No, I had to change. I had to become a different kind of leader. And that was really just the inflection point for me that led to everything that's happened since then.
Yeah, that's a huge self-awareness that you had to bring to make that change, because those are emotional changes, and those are the very, very difficult ones to make. I think what most of my listeners don't realize is that this Menlo Innovations is a technology company, software development, right?
Yep. We design and develop software. We could probably do it for most of your listeners. We build software for other businesses. That's what we do for a living. And
so, you're based clearly in the mecca of Silicon Valley. No, I'm just kidding. You're in the middle of the country, right?
Yep.
Basically,
Michigan? Ann Arbor, Michigan. I love the cognitive disconnect that occurs when people are like, oh, Menlo Innovations. Obviously, you're in Menlo Park, California. Like, go to the other coast. We named ourselves after Edison's Menlo Park, New Jersey lab, which was this place of high human energy, camaraderie, and great invention. And that's what we wanted to do.
Now, your team. So Menlo. So what type of software are you building? Are you building I can't call it traditional, but enterprise class software that you're deploying in like Amazon and Azure type environments, or are you building, kind of COT software for folks? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So at our heart, we are builders. We are engineers, and our mission is to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. So we want to delight the end users of the software that we're building. That's our purpose. That's what drives us every day. And so we've created an entirely new kind of system for designing and building software. One that's interesting enough that over 3,000 people a year come from all over the world just to see how we do it, because it's so different and it produces such different results. But the software that we build, the type of projects we work on, if an MBA looked at us, we'd probably look schizophrenic at one level. But for us, it's all the same. Understanding what problem we're trying to solve, who we're trying to solve it for, and what is the best approach technically to solve that problem for those people. So that can involve cloud-based computing, that can involve apps on iPhones and Android. It can involve building a web-based service. It really doesn't matter to us. In terms of technology, we're generalists, but our focus, and we had to create an entirely new practice to make this come true. Our focus is to delight the end user with not only a great user experience, but really solid working software. And so we invented this new practice that many would call our design thinking practice, but we call it high-tech anthropology. And it's all about studying the people we intend to serve in their native environment. Because until we understand the people we intend to serve, we're not going to build great software for them.
So you're really going beyond the buyer, the metaphorical person writing the check, and you're actually saying, what is the experience that the user of that software is going to experience? At Red Zone, we have ours is to secure the lives of a billion people. So we work with, just metaphorically speaking, a credit union. That credit union might have 50,000 members. So it's the members that are doing business with that credit union. You want to impact their security, their safety, their experience of trust with that organization. So it's an interesting, you've kind of gone one step beyond just delivering that statement of work, so to speak.
It might even be 2 or 3 steps beyond. If you think how software actually gets deployed, right? Think, and I'm going to make up a project, but just pretend with me here a little bit, because we've never done any work for, say, a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something like that. But think of one of your favorite retailers, and you're at the counter, and you've got the rake, the shovel, the board or something, and it doesn't have the magical little sticker on it. And it's such a torturous experience, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
And the clerk is under pressure. You're feeling bad. There's 10 people behind you whose blood pressure is rising because, oh God, he doesn't have the sticker, And what we want to do is delight that person, both the customer and the clerk, right?
Okay.
Well, let's say that they came to us to build software, right? Well, some, purchasing agent at Lowe's is going to negotiate a contract with us. We're going to work with the IT team. We're going to create something. It's probably or maybe it's even the point of sale vendor that Lowe's is buying the stuff from, or Home Depot. And eventually, one day it shows up at this checkout counter. Think how many layers of people it took to get down to that point. That person who's frustrated by it every single day, who sees what needs to be done or what could be done, has no voice whatsoever in the design of that software. Our high-tech anthropologists skirt past all of those layers. They would literally go and watch 100 transactions. And that's all they probably need to watch.
Sure.
And they would learn everything they need to know to create an experience that would be mind-blowingly good for every customer and every clerk. But it's cutting through, it's cutting across. I mean, just imagine, I always picture, let's say that clerk really did have a great idea how to solve this. Who would they tell? Okay, they tell the manager of the store, who tells the district manager, who tells the product manager, who somehow has a monthly meeting with the point of sale vendor, who is taking all these requests from all these different places. I mean, the odds that idea would ever get back are near zero. And we cut through all of that by putting our anthropologists out right where the work gets done.
I love that. That is a I think complexity of technology can get in the way of the human. We're designing it for humans and to humans to use, and your approach, like you said, cuts through the complexity, because I think you can get really mired down in the different component parts, the multi-tier architecture, the type of device it's on, and all of this stuff. But the actual end experience is really the end goal.
And the funny thing is, Bill, a lot of times the difference between joy is the word we use for this, and frustration are very simple changes. They don't necessarily mean profound, tear down the old system and rebuild the new one. Sometimes it's a really little thing. Sometimes it's as simple as a change of a word.
I have a question. I don't like the word happy.
Yes.
I think it's like a marketing term. I don't know. It just rubs me, but I do like the word satisfied. I do like the word joy. So how did you go through kind of the infinite choices? I'm sure you're very intentional. So why did you pick joy versus excited?
Yeah. For me, I've gotten this question a lot, as you can imagine, having written 2 books with the word joy on the cover. And in the early days, my answer was the wrong answer, but it was the one I first came to. I looked back in my own career and all the hard, and look, what you do and what we do and what so many others do, particularly your listeners, it's hard work. It's exacting work. It is. You know, you're going to lie awake at nights worrying about, did we leave a hole, a gap? Is there a bug? Is there going to be an event that we want to avoid, and that sort of thing? You couldn't possibly be happy every minute of every day doing what we do.
Yes. Okay. Got it. Yep.
Right. You know, it would require medication.
Yeah. It totally.
And so, but joy is for me, it's this much longer arc.
It's more persistent. It seems more persistent too, Rich.
Yeah, and it's hard work done well together and delivering some kind of change to the world. And, you know, and I thought it was just technological. You know, I thought it was, because I think of the heart of a software engineer, and you know what they want more than anything else, Bill? They want to deliver something to the world that somebody later comes back and says, you know what? I love that thing you did. You made my life better because of it. Right. That's joy. But I had to dig even further back in my own life to figure out, where did this come from for me? And I thought back to my earlier days, long before I touched a computer. And I was 10. My parents had gotten the equivalent of an IKEA bookshelf. It was out in the garage in a box. They went out to dinner and movie. And I was on my own, and I went out and I built that shelving unit. It was probably 8 feet wide and 6 feet tall. And then I thought, oh no, I built it in the garage and Mom wants it in the living room. So over the next hour, I literally inched that thing out the front of the garage, down the sidewalk, through the utility room, the kitchen, pushed it right into the living room like Mom wanted it, set up Mom knickknacks, Dad's books, wired up the stereo. And when they walked in, I had Mom's favorite album playing, and she cried.
Wow.
Joy.
Right.
Joy is serving others. And that's, for me, that's the essence of what I try and communicate, is how can we systematically serve others to the point that they are delighted with what we do? And this isn't just about being real, like super duper technologists or anything like that. I think we have a very capable team, but we're getting extraordinary, maybe in your terms, we're getting 10x results out of regular people.
Right.
And that's really that if there's a method of management we should be pursuing, it's that.
See, that I think you've hit on something. That 10x results from ordinary people forces a leadership that you used earlier, hero-based, avoids, I made note of it, avoids the hero-based organization. That I think is the trap of technology today, because there's literally no way to chase down every domain of expertise needed. Yeah. There's no budget. There's no infinite budget for a lot of the IT buyers. They can't staff enough experts.
Well, and I will tell you, the last thing you want to be in our industry these days is a hero, because that means you're not going to see your family. You're not going to learn anything new, because they're going to double down on your tower of knowledge. You're going to stay stuck there for decades until one day your skills aren't even needed anymore because some new advance came out. Think of the old COBOL programmers who only know one particular thing. And that's a very despondent place to be. It's not why people got into this industry in the first place. I mean, our industry is filled with dedicated professionals, right? They care deeply about what they do. They went to school to study and learn. But they were also excited about the technological frontier they were part of. And when you become the hero, your world begins to narrow. Suddenly, you're this tower that no one else knows what you know. And it felt like job security for a while. But one day you woke up and realized it's a prison you can't escape from. And they just keep heaping stuff on the hero, heaping stuff on the hero. And, you know, and then you're like, hey, I want to go help that team build a new thing on the cloud-based computing. Like, oh, no, you stay right here. You know, that's where your value is. And if you decide to quit, what do? They throw more money at you. And then they price you out of the market. So you can't even go somewhere else. And even if you did, what would your resume say? Oh, you're the Oracle 9.1.1.3 Service Pack 2 expert. We need one of those. Ours just quit last week. And you're like, no, I want to go do something new.
Yeah.
It's a terrible place we've gotten ourselves as an industry.
And a lot of the CIOs, for them to reach that kind of upper class leader, they're seen as the smartest person in the room. And definitely was the case 10 years ago. Now that's a trap. And so they need to look at leadership from a completely different perspective. And I'd love to get so you put yourself out there. What I love is that it's a very courageous, bold to put yourself out there as the chief joy officer, especially in the tech world, because the last thing, they can sniff insincerity. They can sniff that the last thing they want to be is joyful. They want to put their hood on, and work in the corner where they're quiet and get good work done. So I'd love to know how you navigated that with your bold title.
It's funny. There was a moment where the joy word suddenly became a movement almost, I would say. I remember the beginning day. Someone had watched Simon Sinek's video on Start With Why. And they sent it to me. They'd heard me speak. They'd been to Menlo. And they said, Rich, you do this. You do what Sinek talks about. And this was back 2010. So, almost 11 years ago. And I listened to it, because what does Sinek say in that? He says, most companies describe what they do. Some even describe how they do it, but very seldom do companies actually tell you why they do what they do. What do you believe? And that sort of thing. And I thought, I don't actually do what this person thinks I do. I'm listening to this video. I'm like, I don't do that. People come in to visit Menlo and I say, we're a software design and development firm. That's what we do for a living. We've got these unusual practices we use, high-tech anthropology, pair programming, that sort of thing. Come and look. I'll show you. We have this visual management system to control everything. But very seldom did I ever state our why. Now, I think they could infer it just from my energy, from my enthusiasm, from my excitement. But I wasn't talking about joy back in those days. And yet, here was this video that just convicted me. And of course, we're doing all these tours. We do about 1 to 3 tours a day. And I lead a lot of them. And I thought, today's the day. I'm going to start with why today. What should I say? And I looked at our mission statement, which had been there kind of from our beginning, and I crafted it. And it said, we're going to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to talk about suffering. I want everybody who comes in here to walk out the door with one word in their mind, suffering. No, okay, that's not it. And right down at the bottom, almost waiting for me like a gift, it was my own words playing back to me. The last line said, our goal since our founding in 2001 is to return joy to one of the most unique endeavors mankind has ever undertaken, the invention of software. And I really believe that. And so this group comes in and I looked at them and I said something I'd never said before. I said, welcome to Menlo. You've come to a place that has very intentionally created a culture focused on the business value of joy.
Business
and
value
they were
joy.
just wide-eyed, frozen, and they're looking at me. They're like, what are you talking about? I said, why are you talking about joy, Rich? We're here to learn about your software practices. We're here to learn how you do stuff. Why are you talking about joy? What difference would joy make? And I looked at him. I said, well, pretend you have a project for us. And pretend for some weird reason we go back and visit that team. Half of the room has joy and the other half doesn't. Which half would you want working on your project?
That's an interesting point, because they can measure now. When you look at, they have two crystals of water, and you can play heavy metal, sort of really angry music on one side, and a symphony on another quiet room with this water, and they can measure the frequency of when they freeze these crystals, listening to these different energy frequencies. It's a complete, one's a chaotic pattern, and one's sort of like the snowflake crystals, just kind of this beautiful pattern. But they can measure this now, is the impact of frequency that the joy and it has, which I find fascinating.
So negative energy disturbs our our natural fractal patterns, is what I'm hearing. So
yes,
our symmetry. Yeah, and I said, which half would you want working on a project? And they said, well, we want the joyful half. I said, why? Why would you care? What difference would it make? And they said, well, they produce better outcomes. They'd be more dedicated to the task. They'd be easier to work with. I will say our industry, has a little bit of a user experience problem in general, right? We're the hooded guys in the corner that nobody wants to talk to. And so I said, okay, come on with me. I'm going to show you how we do what we do. And you can stop me anywhere and I can draw a short, straight line back to joy. And literally, Bill, that changed everything.
That changed everything for you right there. That was a major moment.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing too is you shifted it from, well, you didn't shift it, but basically you recognized the suffering part, ending human suffering through that. So you've identified sort of one end of the stick, but then the other. What's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is the joy end. So it's like, well, we can't stay focused on that because we're just going to get more of that. So you're like had the opposite antithesis, which I find which is powerful.
Yep. Well, and and suffering is a lot of waste. Because think how many people show up at work on a Monday morning and they have no idea what they're supposed to be working on. Not that they're not busy, but they're so overloaded, right? And they kind of spent the weekend, maybe the drive-in, thinking, what should I be working on this morning? What's my highest priority? And maybe they settle on it, but they walk in the door, somebody catches them and says, hey, Bill, remember that thing we talked about last week? This is really important. And then you get closer to your office, phone's ringing. Hey, Bill, come here a second. I got a hot customer on the phone. And then you're remembering the meeting on Friday when somebody was pounding their fist at the table. By the time you get to your desk, you're like, I have no idea. And then what happens? Then you open up your email and there's 14 more things that could distract you. And you're like, I don't even know which way to go right now. And we have none of that at Menlo. The level of clarity we have is through the roof.
And there's no way to deal with complexity without massive clarity. As a leader, it's like we're heading.
Teamwork is critical, right? None of the problems you solve or we solve or any of your customers solve can be done by individuals anymore. It has to be team.
It has to be team. And you have to, if you're heading east by a certain degree latitude, you got to be heading there. Otherwise, if you're off by 2 degrees, if you're trying to hit UK, you're going to end up in Spain or end up in North Africa. So it's a big deal, and especially in the software development world, you've got to have those. You got to be working as that team all the way along the way, so that you end up with the end goal. What is the biggest misconception that people have from your overall philosophy or the questions they ask about the book? Is there a general question that comes up more than others that you're like, you know what, if I had to rewrite the book, I would have just addressed that up front? I'd love to know the biggest, because you've already put yourself out there. Like you're not just burying this in a mission statement about joy. You actually have it as your title. So you're front and center with your ambition every day. So you sort of have to, you have to walk your walk.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is where our tours are intriguing, right? We get 3,000 to 4,000 people a year, and now virtually, come from all over the world just to see how we do what we do. Because let me tell you, when they read the book, they're like, I want to come see it. And we're like, yeah, come on in. Come and see it.
That's great.
Right? And talk directly to the people who work there. And so
you don't even need sales reps anymore, Rich. You don't need any, you just have to write books.
I will say it. It's true. We don't have any sales reps.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So, or we have lots of them. Everybody who read the book, is a sales.
So listen to that. Everybody who's a potential buyer out there, you have to deal with no sales reps.
It's true. It's 100% true. And believe me, I love to sell. I mean, for me, that is just such a noble occupation. But sales at its best is when you're delivering value at every point of contact. And that's our view. We teach our methods, we share it with others, we monetize that. So you can say, oh, it's you're profiting on your marketing. Yes, but our goal is to deliver value at every point of contact. Why wouldn't people be willing to pay for that value? But I will tell you the back to your question, and it's asked in so many different ways, but the underlying tone is, how much does joy cost? As if it's some kind of zero-sum game.
What's the load? What's the extra load on the hourly rate?
What percentage? How much does it slow you down? What's your cost on productivity? And like, are you kidding me? Let's look at the Gallup statistics.
So that's interesting. You think joy potentially gives you speed?
Of course it does.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
How could it not?
Yeah, right.
It's just, and look, it's just so darn obvious, because when you come into work and there's high clarity and you know what you're going to be working on and you trust the people around you, and there isn't this hero-based worship where you're like, how do I, think of the companies, for example, who employed the rank and yank model of work.
Cisco, this drop the bottom 20% of
GE under Jack Welch,
Jack
and
Welch.
like Microsoft under Steve Ballmer and all that sort of thing. What a horrible system, because I sort of get where they were thinking, oh, we're going to make ourselves better. No, you're not. Because I don't have to run faster than the tiger anymore. I just have to run faster than you. And I can throw you under the bus in the coffee room when the CEO's within earshot. Hey, how's that project Bill's working on? I've heard it's really in a lot of trouble, right? And then you think of the companies who, like, I call it 259 days of the work year. You got 52 weeks, 5 days a week, who have this message of teamwork, collaboration, trust, all this sort of thing, right? You got the posters on the wall, you got the once a year rah-rah speech and everything. And then the door closes for that one day. When I'm with you one-on-one, I'm the boss. Bill, let's go over your individual performance goals. How did you compare to your peers? And all of a sudden, that 259 days of messaging washes away like the sand in a high tide, in a strong wind. And you're like, oh, this isn't about teamwork at all. This is about, how do I compare to everybody around me? This is about, how do I make sure I'm the strongest voice in the room? How do I make sure I'm drowning out the ideas of others? It doesn't take long. Because then at the end, what is everybody going to that room looking for? Exceeds expectations.
So is the biggest misconception, what we just mentioned, was that that this has a high cost, and it's the antithesis of speed and high productivity.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And and there's so much to talk about and unpack there, but I'll let you ask the next question.
Well, I can't do justice, in the 45 minutes we have for the full book, but and I have the benefit of having the previous interview, but I just a lot of the CIOs really need to revamp themselves. They're at a point now where they're the most important officer in their organization. I call them they're the API of the organization, both because they have to have the communication skills to have great relationships across all of the management team. What's your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Yada, yada, yada. But then they actually have to have a team that physically can connect systems together via APIs and other methods. And so and it's the youngest profession in the business. The human resource officer, CEO, have been around since the French and Indian War, potentially like Mesopotamia, like a long time. And so they have to become great leaders now, and EQ skills, I love that word EQ. The EQ skills, there's a lot of questions about that, but I like what I've been hearing a lot is this, I'm not sure I agree with the word, but I'd love to know your thoughts on servant leader and giving it some grounding as far as what you mean by being a servant leader, because I think that's something that all listeners would resonate with, is they can take within their own organizations and start to use it.
That's so cool, because that's where I wanted to go next. But I've got this question. If we're going to be intentional about our culture, and we are, and I would encourage everybody else to think about this idea of being intentional about your culture, right? And intentional is different than default. Default is, who did we hire? What behaviors do we tolerate? What attitudes walked in the door today? That's the typical culture. And you never know if it's going to work today or not. And they can work for a long time until one day they stop and nobody knows why. Intentional culture is, you're going to find evidence in everything you do. And so let's take, for example, interviewing. This is the first moment of teaching a culture, right?
Okay. So
when we interview in a group. we get lots of people together and we interview them all at the same time within eyeshot and earshot of each other. Okay. And then we pair them, because this is the way we work, we pair them during the interview with another candidate. And then we give them the weirdest instructions ever. Your job is to help the person sitting next to you get a second interview. Make your partner look good. Help the person sitting next to you succeed. And what are we doing? We're teaching our culture. This is improv theater at its best. Your job when you step onto the stage of Menlo every day is to be the least important person here to help everyone around you succeed. That's servant leadership. We're teaching it from the moment of first contact.
I see.
And I will tell you, brains start twisting in the wind because they're like, whoa, wait a minute. No, I want the second interview. Help your pair partner succeed. Help the person sitting next to you look better than they are. If they struggle, help them out. If they're trying to answer a question and you have the answer, give it to them. Don't lord it over that you know something that they don't. You know, some of the things we tell our team, the most important thing you can say during the course of a day, and we teach this right again, is I don't know. Well, that's antithetical to the way most technical people, no, I'm answer man, you come to me. And like, no, if you don't know, we want you to say, I don't know.
But what if you need someone to figure it out? Like they have to have that they have to learn how to figure things out versus leaning on Mary because Mary tends to be quicker with getting research done or whatever.
Well, you know, and this has as much to do with Mary as it does with whoever Mary's helping, right? Because now the question is, let's say Mary doesn't know the answer. Let's say Mary has more experience than Bill does. And when they're paired together, right? Mary's job, because remember, we pair everybody at Menlo. So programmers pair, for example, they're working two people to one keyboard and mouse all day long. Mary's job is to teach Bill through his ears and his fingertips. Not, hey, come watch me show you how smart I am.
Okay.
Sit back, let Bill take the keyboard and mouse. Yes, maybe go a little slower, maybe a few less keystrokes per second, but let's not be confused. Programming's never been about keystrokes per second, ever in its history. Everybody gets confused about that. But Mary's job is to make Bill a little better today, right? And through teaching Bill, the organization gets stronger, not just Bill.
The organizational intelligence, yeah.
And Mary gets stronger because you learn better when you're teaching others. And so imagine you have a process that grows your team by an inch every day. Think how many of your CIOs are figuring out, how do I upskill my team? How do I get them up on the latest technologies?
Yeah.
How do they keep up with all the things? Because the most disruptive industry to our industry is our industry. We're changing everything all the time, right? All the tools that, I learned in college. What, you think I can program in C anymore?
Yeah, right.
Or Pascal or Algol or something like that?
Fortran.
Or I need 360 assembly language. You think those are important skills? Maybe the 360 assembly language is still important. I don't know. But we have to be learning every minute of every day. If you don't build a learning organization, like you're saying you described in the fifth discipline, you're falling behind fast.
Yeah, that learning discipline. And which is interesting, I think you mentioned that learning at that inch at a time, it doesn't seem like a lot, but essentially over a year, that creates some of that exponential 10x learning within your organization. So maybe it's a combination of patience and but also it's not just Mary's teaching Bill, it's Mary's, he's running the, albeit a little bit slower, he's learning through her coaching, her mentoring.
Yeah, and she's learning to be a good mentor.
Yeah.
Right, and Bill's learning teaching techniques from Mary as well.
Yeah, mentorship comes up quite a bit because I think mentorship right now is for us to upskill. You mentioned the word upskilling. Upskilling is what forces and compels CIOs to reach out to my company and your company. It's because the skills within the four walls, they need to have those skills and get the result a little bit faster. And so, but we have the same issue in the sense that our team has to keep modernized all the time.
Yep.
And so maybe they can take some of the approaches you have and just use it within their own organization.
Well, you think of the traditional learning moments where you take your team and they're let's say when when AWS first came out, and everybody was hearing about cloud computing, and you felt like, oh my gosh, my team's behind, and I got to go learn about cloud. So you send 5 people off to a training class in another state for 5 days or something like that. That's really costly in terms of time, in terms of budget. And the problem is, if they don't come back on the next Monday and start applying it, the knowledge starts bleeding down immediately, right?
Right.
And by the time they actually need the skills, when the first AWS project actually arrives, which was 6 months after you were expecting, and you go back to this team of 5, they're like, I don't even remember where the books are from the class. I've completely forgotten everything. And you're like, why are we spending money on all this training, right? We just build it right into how we work. And so if we get a new project like that, we just put 2 people on it. 2 people are amazing at pushing themselves forward through, a new thing. And by the end of the week, they've actually learned something. And maybe they've grabbed a bunch of books. Maybe they've talked to some peers who know about some of this stuff, but they're applying this every single day. And then within a few weeks, because we switch the pairs every 5 days, that knowledge is racing through the team.
I know you've captured a lot of the learning in the book in the different chapters, but just for the sake of the time we have in the interview today, on these tours, I think listeners really, I was going to bring this up, but you mentioned it. Your company's about 50 employees or so, right around that mark. Okay, and my company's right around 40, 42. So people listening are like, well, hold on. He said 1,000 people, roughly a month, right, are coming through.
No, about 3,000 a year.
3,000 a year.
Yep.
I mean, that just to tour and see your organization. And so there's too many principles to go through in this call, but there's got to be a theme or two that you think that people leave with lights turning on, like just even that approach you just said about multiple people learning. And we talked about servant leadership, and maybe we can go back to that, but what is the one predominant takeaway, the people theme that they leave with, or something that just makes, out of all of them, ranking 1 through 10 seems to be the one that people leave with the most? That's just like, gosh, this is such a great tour because I learned X. What is that?
I have had many occasions where the people arriving for the first time are coming in with me. Like maybe I'm coming down the elevator with them in our building, and we're about to walk into Menlo. They're about to arrive for the first time, and I'm getting to work that day. And I'll accompany them as the doors open. We got these big glass doors as they're walking into the room. And I hear it almost every single time. It is so predictable. I wait for it. The doors open, and they go, wow. And so I think, we could talk about practices of visual management, of the pairing practice, of the weird ways we interview, like I described, the dogs, the babies, all that kind of stuff. I think what they walk out with is, I have never felt so much human energy in a workplace.
Interesting.
And they're blown away by it because, look, our industry is famous for, Dilbert-esque caricature, right? Let's put the introverted engineer in a sensory deprivation chamber. Let's turn the lights down low. Let's keep it library quiet, and let them put headphones on, and let them come in at weird hours so they don't overlap with other humans, and later lament that these brilliant people lack interpersonal skills. Right. Shocking. I mean, you think it's because they're not talking to anybody? And so I think they're blown away by some real basic stuff. They look at us and they're like, did you somehow capture the world's most extroverted programmers? No, because there aren't that many out there anyways. We are a team of introverts. And they're like, well, that can't be true. You guys are talking to each other all day. There's laughter, there's energy, there's excitement. I'm like, yeah, our anecdotal evidence, without, we're not academic researchers on this subject. Introverts don't prefer sensory deprivation and isolation. What they prefer are fewer, safer, deeper relationships with other people. And in our world, they get that. And so I think what people are blown away by is, and number one is how consistent the message is with whoever they talk to. I'm not leading all the tours. I lead a fair amount of them just because I like doing it. But then we'll go around and we'll talk to people. They're like, wow, how do you do this? I mean, this is crazy. Everybody's speaking the same language. Everybody's talking about joy in the same way. Everybody's talking about their productivity in the same way. Everybody's talking about the visual management system. I love this the other day. A new person joined our team, Jenny. And we're doing virtual tours now, which is great for your audience because it doesn't cost anything now to come visit Menlo, and not even a flight or a hotel room or even time away from the office, which we're all in our homes anyways. But Jenny was one of the pair of people that we brought into this virtual tour. And I just, sort of as a little bit of a tour de force, I said, hey, Jenny, could you describe to our guests how you knew what you were working on today? How does that work come to you? How does Menlo organize that process? And Bill, she spent the next 5 minutes describing Menlo's process from beginning to end with such clarity, such understanding, and such enthusiasm. The audience was getting a lot out of it. And I said, so Jenny, how long have you worked at Menlo? She looked at me and says, well, I'm actually in the 3rd day of my 3-week trial. So I've been here about 3 days. And of course, at that point,
wow. People are blown away.
I mean, most people in their first 3 days don't even know how to tell you get to the bathroom or where the cafeteria is or how to make a cup of coffee. And Jenny has perfectly described our practices from end to end. Why? It's not because we have some amazing first day class in Menlo's processes that teach us. No, we just put her to work with a peer partner.
With a peer partner, yeah.
Going to teach them every step of the way. And so they're just amazed at all of that.
Yeah. So the energy, and for those of you, as I highly recommend everybody get a copy of both books. For certain, we're talking about Rich's latest one, but the ability for him to work in these pods and units that kind of can break them down, put them back together again. There's animals, there's pets, there's babies. He's got a lot of philosophy that we're not talking about, but we're hitting the kind of the major themes right now. And I think from a servant leader, we hear a lot about that. And so for the listeners, you'll be able to break down what that means from Rich's lens, what's worked in our technology community, which is just such a great thing. Because if you could, it's interesting because we are not too dissimilar from a business size point of view, but you've essentially changed the whole game of like the energy you bring to the marketplace. And so I think that's a huge bright light. And you've made a statement in here. Some people ask you, well, how come you don't like take this company from a size perspective to a much bigger and bring joy and your message to a wider audience per se. And I loved your answer. And I wonder if you could just share that a little bit about, you seem to have kept a governor on size, but it was very intentional. And I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, well, number one, we don't have any outside forces on us to make us grow to an unwieldy size or at an unwieldy pace, because I think sometimes growth for growth's sake is what kills a lot of organizations. And so we have no outside investors other than Mrs. Sheridan and my co-founder's wife. And so we're trying to build something that's going to last. So we're growing more like an oak tree than a poplar, if you will, sure, in terms of growth. And, so our goal is to deliver the Menlo effect to the world. We are trying to change the world from our little perch. It doesn't have to be us doing it.
Right.
We can teach others how to do this. And so when we talk to the team about this, and they've asked us, because we do have plans for growth over the next many years, but it's not going to be wild. We're not going to be at thousands of people. But they ask us why. Why do you want to grow at all? Why not just stay exactly where we are? And I said, we want to increase the export of what we call the Menlo effect. And we can do that at a slightly larger size. But we have had dramatic impact at companies as large as General Electric Corporation and Mass Mutual Corporation and Nationwide Financial down in Columbus. From our tiny little size, we have had worldwide reach and worldwide effect.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I really applaud you for that. And I know we're at the top of our show, and is there anything in particular you wanted me to ask that I didn't get to, or a particular thing that you wanted to make sure that you conveyed to my audience before we wrap up?
Well, I would just say if people were intrigued by our conversation, and I loved it. This was fun. Thank you, Bill. You're a great interviewer. Come visit. Just go to our website, look up on the top of the page, and it says workshops and tours. Click on the tours link and come visit. It's free.
I'm going to definitely put that on the show notes, and I'm going to put a link to where people can purchase the book, Chief Joy Officer, and also put a link to the previous interview we did. And we'll have a link in the show notes to get to this virtual tour. I have one last question for you. What is the one thing since the Corona hit that you are so glad about it hitting, for the sake that it forced you to do something that you always wanted to do, that you never would have had the focus to get done in this past year?
You know, I will tell you, when this hit, I was unnerved, because I'm a guy who has spoken for 19 years about principles and practices tied together. And I watched our team adapt almost effortlessly. It was just a joy to watch, for sure. And they led me out of all of this. They led me out of this state. Was like, oh my gosh, we might have lost everything. And I think the thing that actually the grandest experiment we've run, which is just, I think we thought about it, but we never thought it would be as compelling or possible, is this idea of virtualizing our tours and our classes and our workshops. You know, because the worldwide reach we get now. We had a hiatus after the pandemic hit where we weren't doing any tours. And then friends of ours in Tennessee said, hey, could we come see how you've adjusted? This must have been a massive change for you. I said, well, you want to do a virtual tour of the virtual Menlo? And they said, oh, you can do that? And I said, I have no idea. Let's run the experiment. And that was back in June. Since then, and it's all been organic, we've had visitors from 55 countries and 36 states.
I love that. It's great. I mean, there's been unbelievable capabilities have come out of new ways of thinking that we never would have
Here's
been.
what I'm convinced of, Bill. Yeah, there was traditional Menlo that I've written about, talked about for 19 years. There's pandemic Menlo, which was a massive change for us, and the team adapted and adjusted. I am willing to just embrace that I have no idea what post-pandemic Menlo is actually going to look like. It is not going to simply be a return to traditional Menlo. There will be a difference. What it is, I'll be honest, I'm excited to see. I'm wide open now. My brain has been reformatted in the last year, and I'm excited to see where we go next. And quite frankly, I have no idea.
Well, you're embracing the unknown, which is a huge leadership principle in itself, and not afraid of it, and willing to pivot and move as it comes to you. So this is great. And Rich, this has been a joy again, no pun intended, but it's been a lot of fun. And I really, this is going to serve a lot of folks that are listening.
Thank you. It was great talking with you, Bill.
Until next time, thanks very much.